All right, well, it's 1:01. I think we might make a start. Welcome, everybody. It's great to see so many people here today. We've had a lot of enrolments for this and people are still coming in, so you're very welcome. The topic today is about the silver lining for in-house lawyers, which our recent surveys have identified both in Singapore and in Australia. And these surveys show that the role of the in-house lawyers has changed over the last 6 months, which isn't surprising, and that there are indications that in-house lawyers will have more influential roles in the future and bigger strategic roles in their organisation. So we're on the cusp of change, and it's a great time to be an in-house lawyer. One interesting piece of data that I saw recently was that Gartner published some figures in 2019 showing that for the first time, more work was retained by the in-house lawyers than was sent to the external lawyers, and that was the tipping point. So it really does show we're on a cusp now, and the power is moving to the in-house lawyers, and it's a fascinating time to be an in-house lawyer. As a matter of housekeeping, the only thing to mention is that there's a Q&A button down there. Do feel free to use it, and we'll leave 10 minutes at the end for questions, and I hope we can deal with those. So please feel free to contribute. I'd now like to introduce my old friend and co-host, Philip Catania. Philip is a partner of Cause Chambers Westgarth. He's head of the Technology and Privacy practice in Melbourne, and he is also the Australian representative on the International Technology Law Association. Our experts, who will be sharing their experiences today, have some fascinating insights, and I'll pass over to Phil to introduce Sashani and Catherine and Craig. Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Ian, and good afternoon, everyone, or good morning, depending on where you are, if you're over on the West Coast, and great that you can join us today. It is my pleasure, in fact, to welcome our three panellists today and to hear their views about how the role of the in-house lawyer has been changing. Our three panellists are, first of all, Sashani Bala, who's the Group Executive General Counsel and Corporate Assurance at the Chartered Accountants Australia and New Zealand. She leads the Corporate Assurance Division, comprising of the legal, company secretariat, risk compliance, and operational excellence teams, which partner with the business to provide integrated assurance across the group's operations in Asia-Pac and the UK. Now, in her previous roles, Sashani held general counsel positions at the FMCG and retail industry, Gloria Jean's Coffees, Primo, and before that, she was a private equity lawyer at Clayton Utz and Bell Gully in New Zealand. Interestingly, if Sashani wasn't a lawyer, she tells us that her alternative career of choice would be a travel fashion blogger, which we might even hear about a bit later on, Sashani. Of course, a career choice completely derailed by what's going on with the pandemic. So welcome, Sashani. Craig Earnshaw is our second panellist. Craig holds a bachelor degrees in law and commerce from, with over 12 years legal, commercial and company secretarial experience in both private practice and the resources and construction industries. Prior to joining Barminco, which is a large mining corporation based in WA, in early 2018, Craig held the positions of corporate counsel at RCR Tomlinson and was in fact a senior associate at my firm in the Perth office of Cause Chambers Westgarth. Now, Craig's got some very interesting hobbies, which include working on farming with his 4-year-old son. Good on you, Craig. Flying, boats and fishing, so a real outdoor person. And I'm glad you're able to do that over in WA. Craig, we yearn for the day we can do that in Melbourne, of course. Our final panellist is Dr. Catherine King. Catherine, welcome. Chief Operating Officer at Yaris Technologies and the co-founder and designer of the Daisy Chain matter management software that I know a number of you know well. Catherine has had senior executive and management roles at the National Australia Bank, Australia Post and Sony. Before joining Yaris, Catherine was the Director of People and Corporate Services at St Vincent's Hospital here in Melbourne. And her interests include writing and recording music in her own recording studio, where I think you might be broadcasting from today, Catherine, bushwalking and surfing. Some good outdoor activities there, folks. Now, I'm going to hand over now to Catherine to talk a little bit about the survey that Catherine produced. Catherine, over to you.
Fantastic. Can you see my show?
We can.
Fantastic, lovely. Thanks very much for that introduction, Phil, and welcome everybody. And thanks for the opportunity to share this research and to have this conversation. It's something we're very interested in at Daisy Chain and Yaris Technologies, and the biggest impact of COVID and post-COVID is all going to be really around people. And I think that one of the things that we enjoy speaking about at Daisy Chain and with our customers and our clients and with the broader community in legal operations is about people and the impacts that different kinds of variables have on people. And so the impact of COVID-19, I guess one of the most important points about it is to discuss, well, really, is there a silver lining? And I guess that the topic today is the opportunity for us now to really be able to dig into that, to think about, well, we obviously can see that there are some really enormous perceived impacts of COVID-19 on legal departments in Australia, but maybe there are ways that we can take better things from that, and that we can both learn from it and grow as a community, as a legal community, but also more broadly. So I'd like to share with you the slides that we have, if they will, there we go, and tell you a little bit about the research that we've conducted. Daisy Chain and the Association of Corporate Counsel in Australia and Alpha Creates got together to create an online survey of legal departments. And the survey really looked at the impact and the challenges faced by legal teams due to COVID-19 and the organisation's response to the pandemic, as well as the post-pandemic future of in-house legal teams. We received 60 responses, and we dug into that, as well as also interviewing some other people in a little bit more depth to get some qualitative data and information as well. Just a little bit about the respondent profiles. There were 19 industries represented and 18% financial services, and the same for information technology and services. Food and beverages 12%, hospital and healthcare 7%. And you can see this area in the graph where the grey section are those businesses which were deemed non-essential, and in yellow, those businesses which were deemed essential businesses. And it's interesting to see the size of the organisation. Most of the respondents represented organisations of varying sizes, 51 to 200 and 1,001 and up to 5,000 being the most prevalent, but there was a big range of different organisation sizes represented in our respondents. In the legal team, many were between the sizes of 2 to 5, but otherwise there was a bit of a spread. 15% had a legal team of 11 to 20, and 13% had a single person in their legal team. 57% were classified as essential businesses, and 43% were classed as non-essential businesses. Now, this is a fascinating topic. Many people aren't directly involved in the business continuity planning and preparedness which takes place in an organisation, but it was really heartening to see that actually 82% of the respondents' organisations actually did have a very well-developed business continuity plan already prepared. Many people, though, we discovered didn't necessarily have a pandemic as part of their business continuity planning. So while people were prepared for various things such as flood or earthquakes or other forms of illnesses, many people hadn't necessarily considered the potential impact of a pandemic. So I think that's something that, of course, everybody will be updating their business continuity plans. They probably already have. And again here by industry. The people who had a business continuity plan, you can see in orange there, and in grey, who did not have a business continuity plan. Most people in IT, financial services, and food, beverages, hospital and healthcare, and publishing had business continuity plans, as well as some of these others that you can see here. And really only a few seem to not have a business continuity plan to be ready to face the issues that are brought up by the pandemic. Procedures implemented by organisations were very diverse. Many people implemented more than one. Everybody seemed to provide remote communication and collaboration of some sort or other, implementing work from home protocols, 98%, curtailing or postponing travel, cancelling events, requiring self-quarantine after travel, social distancing, providing counselling and peer support, changing facility cleaning schedules, providing PPE, changing or rescheduling working hours, or altering policies and access for paid and unpaid leave. Many people did many things to respond immediately to the COVID-19 threat. And in this particular graph, you can see the number of procedures that were implemented. 25% implemented 11 or more of those procedures. And you can see that people implemented 8, 9, 10, and 11 procedures to deal with COVID quickly and effectively and very comprehensively. So the average number of procedures that were implemented was actually 8.8. And we asked people, what could you have done differently in your organisation? And actually most people thought they were fairly satisfied with their organisation's COVID-19 response. About 15% felt that companies did have the necessary components, but weren't quite prepared to deploy them all. And the remaining respondents felt that their organisation's response had some gaps, often in communications and cultural and work flexibility. But that's something that just seems to be really continuing to change as COVID has continued. So the legal budget, this is an interesting question that we asked, and interestingly, for most people, there was no change. People were proceeding with their 2020 budget as planned, 53%. Now, 33% reported that non-essential projects were postponed or cancelled, and 17% indicated staffing changes, and another 17% indicated staff professional development is reduced or withdrawn. In terms of the other responses here included reduction in external legal expenditure, as well as internal legal expenditure, prioritisation of COVID projects, and a complete freeze on travels. In terms of the impact on COVID-19 on legal budgets, 60% of respondents reported no change or impact, and those reporting an impact reported decreases more frequently than increases. Probably not a surprise to anybody here. But workload, this is an area that has changed. Some workloads remained unchanged or fairly neutral. However, for the majority, workloads increased. 79% of people's workloads increased, and many had significantly increased workloads. I'm sure many people here today will have experienced that quite directly. Now we do a comparison, workloads versus budgets for legal teams, and you can see that 74% of the respondents saw their workloads increase, with either no change or an actual decrease in their legal budgets as a result of COVID-19. So while workload increased, there was no further budget for most. And the legal teams, how have they responded to COVID-19? Well, as you're probably aware, almost all respondents are working remotely and have implemented their work from home procedures. And in this case, those who indicated other noted they are cultivating a stronger network and sharing of ideas and issues with peers as they deal with the impacts on their organisation and their teams. So 97% working remotely, 77% working from home, reviewing their legal positions with regard to existing contracts, implemented legal technology, and dealing with force majeure notifications. Legal tech acquisitions have been, in the past 12 months, have been increasing. Many people, 44%, have purchased a matter management system, 37% contract management, 26% document management, and further here, knowledge management and project management, secured communications, reporting, triage, and other. So close to half of Australia's organisations have acquired legal tech in the last 12 months. And for those people who reported acquiring legal tech, 44% acquired matter management. So as in-house lawyers transition to working remotely, their most useful tool has been collaboration software. And for those respondents who indicated others here, they found Office 365 Suite very useful. And people are using things like Slack and HipChat and Teams, and there's many different forms of collaboration that have been very effectively used, and people have really become quite used to them in the day-to-day. So what did legal teams think about the impact on the economy? Well, virtually all respondents predicted COVID-19 will have a moderate term impact or a devastating and long-term impact on the economy. So you can see that here, this is where the moderate term impact is really showing, up to 3% who thought there was going to be a devastating and long-term economic impact. Many people see a big long-term effect. But respondents are actually divided on whether COVID will have a negative impact or positive impact on their actual organisations. Many people actually saw that there could be, this is where we can discuss the silver lining. Many people noted that there may actually be opportunities. The impact may be neutral over time, or there may actually be opportunities for the organisation to grow in some areas or to grow in some ways. And certainly there have been organisations that have experienced really exponential growth, the supermarkets, the hardware stores and the home renovations. And how will working life change? And again, this is back to the people. We see that 48% of people thought working life would change forever, and there'll be a greater embrace of remote working and flexible working. Some people did, though, believe the current change is temporary and that will all revert back to normal, about 10%. And some people think there'll be a transition somewhere between the new normal and before. But overwhelmingly, most respondents believe that working life will change post-COVID-19 forever. So that's possibly another silver lining for those who are enjoying the current ways of working. In terms of reopening, many people are going to continue with remote work for some time. There'll be limited travel and alternate teams on different days. People are going to be, many, avoiding group meetings with staggered start and finish times and avoiding public transport, wearing masks and potentially even wearing gloves. So the majority are going to continue remote working and limiting travel, and people will be staggered coming back to the workforce. So the continuation of remote work, overwhelmingly, a majority of respondents believe their organisations will continue remote working even after their offices reopen. And that's another potential silver lining for from our respondents' viewpoint, and hopefully also our panellists will be able to explore that. In terms of returning to the office, here's our stage one. Focus is still on day-to-day operations with no plan to return at 33%. People have begun planning the post-COVID workplace 42%. 17% have plans to return to the office. They're complete, but we've not yet returned. And 8% have executed the plans and people are returning to the office now. And that's our last slide in this presentation. Just to note that, again, I think that I'm looking forward to hearing from our other panelists and also hopefully from the audience. If you'd like to ask any questions at all of our panelists, our hosts and each other, please feel free to ask a question in the Q&A section. Thank you. Back to you.
Thanks very much. Now I'll turn to our panellists. I thought it might be a bit ho-hum to talk about what you've done about COVID again, but when we had a run through with Craig and Sashani, their responses were very diverse and it was very interesting. So I'd like to start with you, Sashani, and ask you, what were your learnings from the responses of your organisation and your team to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Thanks, Ian. Look, to us, COVID has been a massive catalyst for change. It has made us reconsider our business model. We've had to pivot. We've had to move to online delivery. We've had virtual trials. We've all made use, I think all in-house lawyers have made use of the COVID emergency legislation to move to remote witnessing, doing affidavits remotely, things like that. It's accelerated remote working. It's stress tested most businesses, including ours, from everything from operating model to supply chain, our ability to manage risk at pace and adapt to changing circumstances while still delivering value. I think for in-house lawyers generally and our business, it's presented us with unprecedented challenges and opportunities. So yes, we've had to react. We've had to execute on the many COVID work streams and deliver them all, but we're told repeatedly as in-house lawyers, you need to be more than a lawyer. You need to keep your eye on the prize. You need to be a strategic business leader. You need to give your CEOs direction and assurance. No better training school to do that through than through a pandemic, and that's what we've seen.
Craig, you come from a very different background with people moving heavy machinery and flying around the country. What has your experience been?
Yeah, well, obviously it was immediate and fairly dramatic, the changes when COVID first hit. I think it's probably fairly well known, the impacts of trying to fly FIFO personnel in and around Australia with hard border closures, particularly in Western Australia. To give you an idea, our business has about 30% of its work in Western Australia, 20% elsewhere in Australia, and 50% across the rest of the world, so North America and Africa predominantly, plus India. So it was immediate and fairly dramatic. We had to immediately put in place strategies to try and just continue operating, and that included, shifting people to where they worked rather than fly in, fly out. It included putting on additional FIFO flights, bus services. Travelling underground was usually done in personnel carriers. Suddenly you had to have a whole bunch more. Some mines in Canada were travelling in a shaft that used to hold 50 that went down to 8 people per shaft. So all of these things just immediately had a big impact. But I think what was quite remarkable was how quickly the industry pivoted and found ways to deal with it, and put in place protocols and systems to ensure that it could risk manage the problem. There was lots of opportunities that came out. There were suddenly more aircraft in the world, so you could do private charters. You could put on more flights to socially distanced people flying around more. You could hire buses that were suddenly not used elsewhere, and socially distanced people on buses. So there was all sorts of things immediately done, and ourselves plus the broader mining industry worked out ways to keep going, to the extent that in Australia, other than probably for the first month, business continuity was very high. We had very little impact. In fact, in the months of April, May and June, we had some of our record production, with people accepting longer rosters on site, so you didn't move from site to places where it could be infected and the like. And so suddenly we had, and particularly internationally, expats, all flying of expats just stopped immediately almost. And so we had people, instead of doing 6-week swings, immediately doing some up to 3 months, all on site. And probably for me is one of the most remarkable things is that how our employees, everyone from operators right through to executive management, has just chipped in, and we could see the data for lawyers workload increased. For everybody in our organisation, workload increased, and that has a toll, obviously, on people. And probably as we see COVID continuing longer, that toll becomes more concerning. I think everybody was able to chip in with fairly small impact initially, but now it's just carrying on. Fortunately, in Western Australia, we're pretty free and everything's back to normal, but certainly internationally, and in particular with the restrictions of people coming back into Australia, there's, it has a toll, particularly isolations and hotel quarantines for 2 weeks. But again, finding ways around it. People are doing R&R in different locations around the world. So it is remarkable how, when necessity strikes, people adapt. And as an organisation, we're very grateful for it. But I think, just more broadly, it demonstrates that, humans do have an ability to be somewhat resilient, which we probably all were starting to feel in the world. People lacked a bit. So it's, it was a dramatic impact. It required an enormous amount of management, but it's been amazing how business continuity has continued.
Speaking of toll, I know you have some views on that, Sashani, and also I suspect Phil might too, with 600 lawyers scattered around the place working in their cubicles at home these days. Sashani, what are your comments on mental health? How are you seeing it at chartered accountants?
I think there's 2 aspects, internally for our teams and then externally to our members. And the common theme running through that is there are a lot of people working very hard at or just dealing with life through this, and everyone has different challenges. Managing mental health, I think, and focusing on people needs to be the forefront of how we respond to the pandemic. People are our engine room, and while the stats show that in-house lawyers and businesses are, in pockets, are very, very busy, the challenge with COVID is that no one's taking a lot of annual leave. because when they are busy and there's nowhere to go, if you are in lockdown, depending on where you're living, it's easy to just keep working through. But that sustained period of working 24/7 and being in fight or flight mode has a people toll. So we're really cognizant of how we've been managing that. And, Chartered Accountants ANZ has been tremendous in terms of how they really have put people over everything else. Managing wellbeing. Our people and culture team have had, virtual yoga, boombox Fridays, things to try and manage people's wellbeing and to help them, give them something positive to look forward to. I think when you take away holidays and everything else that, humans, we want to have things that we can look forward to and enjoy. It's a really difficult situation to manage. So people focused is our main thing. In terms of how we've been helping our members, so obviously we have a broad membership group. They work across all industries and sectors. We've been helping them with things like business continuity playbooks. How do you, move to cloud? How do you pivot your business model to the cloud and being virtual when there's a lot of regulatory and legislative compliance? Not dissimilar to the mining industry, where you have to do things face to face, you have to do things in the office. So helping our membership pivot has been our focus point to make sure they're ready to go through this.
Is the government helpful on that with all the bureaucracy and the non-online requirements?
Yeah, I think we've seen it in different pockets. So obviously with all the legislation that's come across the suite of business in Australia, there's stuff that applies to small businesses, there's JobKeeper things, there's things that apply to different industries. I think generally we've been quite responsive, but that still means it's hard for people to change. So if your business model wasn't virtual and in the cloud, it's much harder to change. Whereas if it is, that transition is easier. So I think it's been helpful, but you're definitely seeing industries that are more progressed in that sector will come out of this better if other ones haven't been able to pivot quickly.
Phil, you'll be having a good overview with your breadth of clientele. Have you got comments on the difference between online and non-online businesses' responses?
Yeah, I probably would say as a general comment, Ian, that many people have adapted really well. And it's been wonderful to see the use of technology being relatively seamless, not always. But some people haven't been, and I've been quite amazed how some people actually didn't have Wi-Fi in their home, and so we had to assist with that. Many people are working from bedrooms and nooks and crannies of their place. And I think the danger for us is that we assume that everyone has transitioned well, when in fact a number of them haven't. So we have to be very mindful of that. And our expectations on delivery of work and turnaround time and things like that need to be adjusted accordingly. The danger is, as I say, you treat everyone in the same way, and we shouldn't. We've invested much more in the mental health side of things, with dedicated people contacting our lawyers and our staff. And again, it's not just our lawyers, that we need to be mindful of that, but our support team, our business support team, need to be looked after. The leave thing is a difficult one. No one is taking any extended leave in Victoria. Thankfully, that's been changing in other states, but very limited leave being taken in Victoria. And so we've been encouraging people to take a day off, at least a day off here and there, so that they can refresh and get away from the screen. And don't worry about the emails, and don't worry about your phone. Turn everything off. It'll be there when you get back, and when you switch on the next day. So our lesson is regular contact, regular social events, regular updates. I try to contact all the lawyers in my team, and there's a lot of them, at least once a day. So it does take up a fair amount of time in terms of management, Ian.
Interesting. A question has just come in, which might be relevant for you, Sashani. I think Phil might have answered it. Have you worked more with HR during this time?
Absolutely, yes. As we start looking at how we go back to the office and the future of work and workforce planning, huge amount of work with our people of culture HR division. When we were getting prepared to deal with the pandemic, a lot of businesses had business continuity plans. We didn't necessarily have containment protocols. What do we do if there's a risk, if there's a WHS issue? Everything from our people to our stakeholders to how we service our members. So it's really made, you know, legal teams work hand in glove with their HR divisions.
And HR is stepping up for it.
Absolutely.
What about the relationships with the executive team and the CEO? How have anyone comments on that? How have relationships changed there? Are the needs changing? They must have changed enormously.
Yeah, I think one thing COVID has been, via our use of Zoom and Teams and virtual technology, it's been a great equaliser. So we have an international executive team. When you're on Zoom in a forum like this, you don't know if someone's next door to you or in a different country. So it's been really great with that. In terms of how the dynamics between management, CEO and boards as well, we've had to have much more meetings because it was 24/7 at the beginning to manage the business and our stakeholders and our consumers, customers through a crisis. So having more frequent, shorter meetings, because you can't sit on Zoom for 6 to 10 hours a day. But it's been, as lawyers, we've had to be very nimble. So questions come up constantly. We've had to be able to adapt, answer them, move on, think of the long-term solution, but be able to articulate how we're going to execute the short-term requirements, never losing sight of the long-term business growth strategies. Because I think there's a danger in a crisis that you can just focus on the constant reactive things that are coming up, but you can't lose term for your long-term business goals. And that's front of mind for our business and our management team.
Are daily stand-ups a part of life for you, Craig?
Yeah, they are. So we have a daily call at 9 a.m. in the morning with the executive team. And that's to just check in that we're continuing our priorities and focusing on how we're progressing. I mean, initially we had two separate calls. One was we stood up a crisis management team, but because for us it looked like our international business, 50% of our work, 70% of our profit could just cease, could stop. And so that was, we had a crisis management meeting in the mornings, and then we had our other priorities catch up in the morning. So that was happening. Within my own team, I also instituted daily catch-ups virtually, which I didn't have before, probably mainly because I would just walk to the offices nearby where my team was, and my international team, I used to catch up with them, 2 or 3 times a week. But yeah, it become much more systematic, and I think that was necessary when you're doing things virtually, just to connect everybody in, but also just to, things were so rapidly changing through the early COVID period that it just had to be managed very closely. And probably the other part to add with HR, we certainly work closely with HR, but probably even closer with the safety team. For us, it was a safety issue of having, in Africa, North America, so Canada, India in particular, where COVID was taking off rapidly. How did we keep our personnel safe? And it was a different dynamic for our safety team. Usually focused more on the, more physical impacts of safety on a mine site, but suddenly they were having to focus on pandemic and assessing a different risk, and then also around mental health as well. So that is probably, we could talk about later, silver lining is that I think it's shifted somewhat of the focus of our safety team into some of the more softer elements of safety.
I would think for our own company, one of the silver linings has been that we are much tighter controlled now with daily stand-ups. I feel that our management finger is really on the pulse these days. I don't know if you want to jump in on that, Catherine. You have a lot to do with those, I know. But Tashani, is that a silver lining that's come for you, the greater control? Have you achieved greater control?
I think the daily stand-ups definitely give us greater visibility of things. When you're in the office, particularly if you're a global business, you just deal with the people in your immediate proximity, and then you might have your fortnightly or monthly catch-up. The daily stand-ups, particularly at the beginning of this, gave us that snapshot every day. So that's been hugely helpful, and helps as General Counsel, helps us give strategic advice in one hit.
I suspect there's a huge silver lining out there in that we office workers will be able to work remotely for most of our time if we want to. Do you want to comment on that now that those management protocols are in place? Sashani?
I think the future of work, I question whether any of us will be going back into the office 5 days a week like it used to be. I think we definitely have to keep a very open mind, and it's different for different teams and different businesses. But we've all proven by being so productive while we're working remotely that presenteeism is very much out of fashion. And it's definitely been something that COVID has accelerated for businesses that haven't been very flexible in their approach. I think if I take a long-term view on it, when we look at the employee value proposition, the value of your brand, we want to be flexible to our staff. Everyone's proved they can do it now. So I guess my question to everyone is, if we haven't been very flexible in the past, particularly for lawyers, why aren't we in the future?
And another thing that seems to me is obviously a huge advantage is that, as somebody said earlier, we're embracing digital technology so much faster. And you see that in as a national entity now too. The Prime Minister put $7.5 billion into digital transformation. Do you want to comment on that, how your businesses are transforming fast because of this?
So with adopting technology, so we use the whole suite of Office 365 tools, Daisy Chain. We use Miro. If anyone hasn't used it before, it's like a virtual whiteboard. It's fantastic. I think one thing COVID's done is that it's changed our risk profiles for most businesses. So previously, we might have spent months and months, often years, scoping out business requirements before we moved to adopt technology, but it's really changed our risk appetite. So there's more of an acceptance to use technology and fail fast quickly and try things out. So really taking a more co-design, iterative approach that you see in technology companies. I think that's coming into more traditional companies where if you don't get on that technology bandwagon and you don't move to virtual delivery of everything, then you're going to be less relevant in the future. It's changed our risk appetite and it's made everyone more open, have a really growth mindset about it.
Phil, do you have any insights from your overview of technology uptake? As a technology, I'd love to say that it's all happening much faster, and it seems to be. We're very active. But what do you think across the board?
Oh, look, it definitely is happening much faster. I echo what Sashana just said there about organisations adopting a more agile approach to implementing at least the technology required to keep the businesses going as strongly as possible. There's no doubt, though, in that the larger scale investments are either being held back, and I think we saw a little bit of that in the survey that Catherine went through. And we read in the press, for example, that organisations like the National Australia Bank have put 100 technology projects on hold, or indeed are not pursuing them. Although I do think they're pursuing other projects. But one of the issues that I'd be, insofar as technology is concerned, about interested in asking both Craig and Sashani and anyone else who wants to contribute to it is, well, in terms of your use of technology to maintain connection with your workforce, what have been the major problems and how have you overcome them? So, for example, in my case, there have been three. The first, and these are, I suspect, sort of localised, but here's the take on the three issues that I've seen. The first is the damned internet at our place, the Wi-Fi. So we've got quite a few people working from home. I've got a son who is a junior accountant working upstairs, and he's purportedly working and downloading all sorts of chart of accounts and things like that. But that slows the local Wi-Fi down significantly. We can't get any faster. That's been a problem. The second one is we use a platform to communicate. We don't use Zoom because of the security concerns that we had. Obviously, we'll access Zoom like this when a client asks us to, but we use the Blue Jeans platform. And the reason for that is it's got significantly high security. A lot of the big technology companies like Facebook and Adobe use it, so it was good. But the problem is if we want to use that with our clients, a lot of our clients' firewalls won't allow them to access the Blue Jeans platform. So we need to find some other solution. That's been a bit of a pain. And the third thing is, for some reason, Outlook has been crashing more than it ever has. I don't know if people have found that. But Craig, Sashani, what have you seen in terms of your use of technology?
Well, I think Outlook was a problem a couple of days ago.
Everyone.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear others have had the issue.
But I echo you. I mean, I live in South Perth, which is close to the city. Should be good NBN service. I've got NBN, but my Wi-Fi is spotty, particularly at nights. And I do a lot of work at night because of the North American and Africa connection, and it's hopeless. So I use a SIM card in my computer through mobile, but that's not just ideal either. So I echo that. What it has done in respect to technology is that I think as everybody has said, is it's made people who are less likely to use it. In my team, I no longer can excuse those members that just don't really want to spend the time to get up to speed with it. It's now a priority, and for those that aren't so good with that, it's now, we did our performance reviews recently, it's now part of their performance review that is to get up to speed, and it's important, and I think across the business it's put a spotlight on the importance of technology, and so things are improving, and we're making sure that our sites are better connected, which they ought to have been in any event. It's accelerated some projects, like we're doing we call BROC, the Barminco Remote Operating Centre, where we can operate from Perth, and we can operate loaders and other equipment from Perth. Because there's very real business imperatives in doing those things. So it's for us, business continuity has been successful, and so we're not slowing down on any technology investment. We're ramping it up. Our clients are keen on it, so it's full steam ahead.
Yeah, I'd really echo what Craig said about digital acumen and tech skill set on in-house teams is not optional anymore. It has to be front of mind, because if we can't use it quickly, it really slows our business down. So yeah, getting the team across that's been fast. I'm lucky I've got a lot of millennials on my team who are very tech savvy and can code and do all kinds of great things, so that's been good. With check-ins with the team, we tend to use WhatsApp and stuff to really separate the social check-in engagement interactions with work, because email is brain drain and a time waster, and it is also hard. I can't keep up the notifications and Teams and Outlook and all the 50 team sites I'm on. The amount of technology and the various channels through which we get notifications is a challenge. So I think really streamlining, use this for social, use this for project work, use this for other things has helped our division. But getting people on that using technology with ease bandwagon, investing in training, I think is something we have to focus on going forward.
And I think there's a good point drawn out there, needing to streamline the technology we use. Something I am noticing is that, particularly when we had to start very quickly sharing things, there's various sharing platforms, and you start just getting lots of duplication and mess. So I think something that we are working through, but it's going to take a bit longer, is to actually go, look, this is what we use, this is how we use it. And I would encourage the likes of technology companies like Yaris to be able to be integrated and interactive with other pieces of technology as much as possible, so that you do remove duplication. If it's one place, it can be another as well, or the like.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. Now we've got about 10 questions, and they're good ones. So I'll put those, if we try and move through those in the remaining 15 minutes. We might need to be a bit circumspect in some of the answers. And since the topic of this was the silver lining for in-house lawyers, could we look at this from the perspective of what's the silver lining? What things are going to be better as a result of this? So I'll put the first question, and I'll read this one. General counsels are increasingly being asked by CEOs to take on a more strategic, commercial and executive role. Can the panel please share their insights in how they have responded to this challenge and how they have built this experience as part of their practice? So Shani, you first.
So I guess similar to Craig, my role is legal and commercial. So I have commercial functions under me, risk governance, COSEC, not just legal. So it hasn't been a significant change because I've always been expected to provide strategic advice, give strategic solutions. I think how we have helped the legal team focus on that is making sure they have a multidextrous skill set, because it is not enough to just give prescriptive legal advice. It is not just enough to answer the business problem with just the legal view. It has to be an integrated solution. So we've really invested in training our lawyers on think about it from a risk perspective. Compliance is only one risk. It's not the be all and end all. There are other risks to a business. Think about it in terms of what's the value add, and think about your audience and look at all of that with the strategic lens. What's the outcome we need here? Who's it going to impact? And what does the CEO and board actually need from us to get through this? So that's been our main focus in making sure that the division is quite strategic.
How do you train your young lawyers to have that mindset?
Yeah, we really invest in, you can't have a fixed mindset. And law schools, and I'll speak to my own training when I was going through big firms, they make you very focused on the black letter law, which you need to have, but having that holistic business view is so important in-house. And the legal answer is only one part of it. And the legal answer might not be the right commercial answer because there's so many other things to consider. So that's something we really make them think about with everything they're doing, whether it's contract analysis, whether it's advising on a project, whether it's looking at litigation strategy. What's the holistic view here, and have you considered all the other things? So you do your black letter law first, but you need to be really cognizant and comfortable with giving those answers to a business. Because when you're called into a boardroom, or you're called into your CEO's office to give an answer, don't just give the legal answer.
Would you say that's a change in emphasis in your time as a general counsel?
Absolutely. This is my third general counsel role, but I remember my first role, it being much more narrowly focused to just legal, and that dramatically changed as technologies come into effect, as the social landscape, political landscapes change. And definitely in the last 24 months, I think just with the political changes, the governance changes, and then COVID and going through a pandemic, strategic advice is expected. It's not optional anymore. Every answer needs to be strategic.
I'd echo exactly that. And I think one of the things that has promoted my team, or even just in being able to provide strategic advice, is the fact that we are online a lot more with meetings. You don't have to just have a meeting with people in your corporate office. It's quite easy to invite in people on projects, managers in other parts of the world. And so they might as well be on the meeting with you, and you might as well get their input and view and actually be able to immediately absorb that and provide the more strategic advice. So I think that's probably a silver lining out of the current circumstance.
I would see that as a huge positive for the in-house profession, wouldn't you? It's a much deeper role. Let the firms do the black letter law, and you can have a much broader role. Is that appealing to you? Is it fulfilling?
Well, I think that's the whole purpose and the value add of having in-house lawyers. And I think what I notice is that I structure my team to be able to do all of the core legal work that we do every day, because simply by them being in the business, they can do that more effectively and inherently bring in the strategic and commercial aspects to it, because they're living and breathing the business more than external lawyers can. And so that's, from my perspective, I think that's key. And I think that has developed over the last few years. General counsels, I know some in the past have generated frustration because of their focus on black letter law without really understanding the whole context in which it's given, and so it just doesn't seem valuable. And that's where value is. It's interesting. It's for us as well. I think it is a positive.
Yeah, it's very heartening. Now there's a few more questions left, so we might need to be a bit pithy with our answers, but they're good questions. And here's one that within our company we've been debating. How do we do about this? And I thank the person whom I know who put this up. See who wants to answer this. How often do you celebrate success within the team or organisation? how well are you checking in with your respective team members? We're thinking ourselves we'll be meeting less, but when we do meet, we want to have celebrations, we want to have a really good Christmas party, etc. So how often do you celebrate success, and how are you checking in with your respective team members? Who would like to comment on that?
We have a standing part of our agenda for our weekly meetings, which is good news. And that's our attempt to try and celebrate everyone's success over the past week. And just to momentarily acknowledge it. Now, are we great at celebrating success? We often talk about it, or that we should do it, but generally we close a new contract or a good deal, or have a great outcome, or high productivity at a particular mine that's maybe a record, but we move straight on and try and deal with the next issue. So we talk about wanting to do it, but we do it a lot less than we ought. But it is nice each week just spending a little bit of time to reflect.
Thank you. Next question, I'm just scrolling through. Now, this question comes from a young person who will be deliberating whether he ultimately wants to join a firm or become in-house. So he wants to answer this. I'm curious to know whether communication and the feedback loop between the in-house and the external counsel has improved. Who would like to answer that? Who's got a good panel?
Good. We all have good panels, but yeah, I think it's improved. I think we really invested with our panel firm relationships well before COVID to make sure that they understood our business model, how we wanted things, in business-ready language, not really theoretical things that none of us understand. So we've really invested in that. We've got templates as to how we want it. We want the answer in a short sentence, things like that. So it wasn't a big shift to do it in COVID when we needed answers quicker across a bigger range of topics. But they've been fantastic in terms of coming to the table on that, and they've been really open to move away from the traditional way of giving legal advice and legal opinions to, our team's pretty quirky on a few things. We want everything to be business ready. So, we use emoticons and we use emojis, and we deliver our legal service delivery model in quite a different way. So it's been quite a journey with firms to go on that with us, but it's been really good.
I can't imagine Phil going on that emoticon journey, but anyway, we might see that. So things have improved in that respect. The firms aren't the traditional sticky sort of places they used to be. You're getting the sort of service that you want to get out of them?
Yeah, I think so generally. I think you have an experience and you avoid the firms or the particular lawyers that can't do that for you. So it's a bit self-selecting.
You're basically happy, speaking generally, not naming firms, are you basically happy with the service you get from external firms?
Yeah, I am. Interestingly, I think Australia is ahead of being giving business-ready advice compared to some other countries. I find they're much quicker in responding and probably a little bit more strategic than some of the firms that I'm using in the likes of Canada and the States, for example.
Here's another question. As an in-house counsel, when you are taking a more strategic and active part in the business, how do you ensure controls are in place to keep the risks and liabilities in check?
Well, I own the risk function as well as risk compliance and legals. So the core part of being a lawyer managing risk is making sure you have good processes, they're mapped, you have controls in place. And if you don't have them, then at least you have some sort of system in place so you can react quickly and mitigate it. So that is always front of mind for everything. You can never not be on the pulse with that, because if something blows up, then it's on our watch. In terms of practically how we do it, we have risk frameworks, registers. COVID's been a good test of all those things because there are so many things that happen and change consistently. But it's really about managing risk and compliance in an agile way in the middle of a pandemic. It doesn't just mean having long bureaucratic policies in your drawer. It's about, if something goes wrong, does the business and does your stakeholder base know how to raise a risk, how to manage it? Do they know, is that a live process? So we're really focused on operationalizing things. If something goes wrong, what do you do? Here's a clear flowchart. How do you actually do it? And that's been really helpful during this.
It's a big issue, that one. I do recall as a private practitioner, the risk weighed very heavily on my shoulders. I suspect it weighs a bit less when you're an employee and your assets aren't on the line for it. but still your reputation's on the line for it. Now, this is a very big question, so I think it demands a short answer. We don't have time to delve into this. Where will technology play a part now? Is it a nice to have or is it a must have? I think a quick answer to this would be appropriate.
Yeah, it's a must to have. It's I think we spoke before about the fact that, you know, for my team, they need to be literate in technology we use. It's not an option anymore.
Sushani?
Yeah, look, we wouldn't be able to function without technology, and there's better and cheaper and very effective technology coming out there. So it's about keeping our eye on what's happening during this as well, because 5 years ago, something might have been very expensive, needed to be highly customized, and then it'll become obsolete in 18 months. So now you can get really good off-the-shelf solutions that can just be configured quickly, and then you can change with you as your business model changes. So I think that's how our approach to technology is changing.
I think it's important to note that I don't think technology solves all of the problems and totally replaces offices or working at work. I mean, we're back at work and been back at work for quite a while now, and I certainly find it quite energizing to be in a workplace environment where you are bouncing things off people. You can see everybody committed in the same purpose. There is something that technology doesn't allow, and that is the human element. But I think these days it's imperative that it's the mix. It's that, but you have to be ready to use technology because there's so many advantages as well, particularly for global businesses, remote businesses, business have remote elements. It is positive.
Now, for the last question, I'm grateful here to George Beaton, who many will know is a very eminent legal consultant. And his question, which is a good question for us to finish on, is what is the biggest single opportunity that COVID is presenting to each of the panellists?
Yeah, that's a question that probably requires a bit of thought, isn't it? It's, for us, it's, I think from my team's perspective, it's the ability to be everywhere. You can't travel everywhere, and we used to try. So it has provided the opportunity for us to be more involved in more aspects of the business more of the time, because we've had to jump in and assist. Every country's got its own regulatory issues around COVID and everything else. We've had to really assist with claims and the commercial impacts of COVID. We've met more people over online. We've met them face to face by video. So I think the biggest opportunity is just that ability to push out into the business very easily and rapidly through technology that's been driven by the necessity of COVID. I think that's probably the biggest opportunity for us.
That's fascinating, Craig. Thank you very much for that. That's a really deep thought. Sushani.
I think if I look at how can we as in-house lawyers and how can my team be match fit for the post-COVID world, it's about upskilling ourselves and diversifying our skill sets. This is the biggest opportunity to do that. I think the in-house lawyer of the future is going to need a very different and evolved skill set to what we've traditionally been doing. This is a huge time to upskill and to get the breadth of experience by being more strategic and taking those opportunities. COVID's giving us so many opportunities. If I look at even my own learning in the last couple of months, it's just accelerated. So we're encouraging our team to do that. As a business, we're doing that, but I think that's a huge opportunity to diversify ourselves.
That will be a very good topic for ACC, won't it? If and when they hold their annual conference. Well, we just came up to 2 o'clock, so I'd like to thank everybody. From my point of view, that's been a really interesting discussion with some very able people. So thank you very much, everybody. This is the first in a series of webinars that we're planning. And the next seminar will be something different. It's on cybersecurity, but we're also going to go actually inside the dark web, a place I've never been before. I've read of it and heard of it in podcasts, and that should be very interesting. We will be sending out that COVID report to everybody, all attendees, with an email, and we'll be adding LinkedIn profiles at the bottom of the email, and you're very welcome to communicate with these speakers or anybody else and make any comments. There were a number of questions that I'm sorry that we couldn't get onto, and there was a very long statement there, Anita, I'm sorry that we couldn't deal with that, but I'm very happy to deal with that offline if you wish. If you have any suggestions for next time, please send them in, and we'll look forward to assembling some really top brains and having a talk again. So thank you very much, everybody, and thank you, panelists. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.